Pathologizing could be slowing your personal growth. We're going to dive deep into this word pathology and pathologizing. And I'm also going to talk about borderline personality disorder, BPD, and even quiet BPD. Are we using those terms to pathologize things that we're going through, maybe even normal responses? So what does the word pathologizing mean? The word in and of itself is like making something abnormal that may actually be normal or be part of your personality. So pathologizing, we're making something a medical issue or a problem, and it may or may not be. And this is what I do. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I have over 20 years of clinical experience. And if you follow me, you know that my real experience comes from my story. So as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, we use what is called the DSM to diagnose mental health concerns. So isn't that pathologizing? I want you to look at this in twofold. So yes, we are using subjective pieces of symptoms to pathologize and create a diagnosis. These are from years of research to help us understand symptoms and receptors. So when there's a symptom going on, there's a receptor in the brain that is responsible for that activity. And so when we're talking about the DSM and in mental health, we are hopefully looking at symptoms and receptors, and we are trying to treat those things based on symptoms and receptors that we know about in the brain. But neurology, psychiatry is still an unfinished territory of how do we actually treat those things. And because it's three-part, it is physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual. But what do I mean when pathologizing, taking normal and making it something, making it a problem? For me, it's on that continuum of I'm not enough. Like I am on this mental health journey and I am embracing the journey. If you follow me, it's all about mental strength. But sometimes we can get into this place where we're never enough and we're pathologizing everything. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. Like I mentioned, I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I assess and diagnose people every day with mental health concerns. But my personal journey is one of overcoming and battling some of those things. I remember the first time I was depressed, probably 14, 15, and it was being manifested as kind of rebellious teen behavior. In my early 20s, I had an eating disorder, and I really struggled with my self-worth and who am I, and am I good enough? And that manifested as depression and anxiety throughout my life. This is even before I had a reason to be depressed. In my personal story, I have lost 3 children over the course of 20 years. And that grief, and with my son and my daughter, Reggie and Maya, it created actual grief trauma. I have had to learn how to navigate the weight of that grief and that trauma, and learn to process that. So I often hear people who have experienced all kinds of grief and trauma, and it manifests as depression, anxiety, and what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, were you going to be depressed anyway, and it's a genetic predisposition, and there's something wrong with your brain, or did that trauma cause that? When I'm treating you and when I'm working on myself, it doesn't matter. We have to treat what is going on now. But there's this pathologizing. That's what this video is about, is pathologizing everything. And I think we sometimes do that. And so I was sitting with my friend the other day, and we were kind of talking about this pathologizing. And we are both women close to 50, and we have been kind of working on ourselves on this mental health journey. We've both been through some pretty heavy grief and trauma, And we were just kind of sitting around as friends talking about where we are in our personal development and where we want to be. We're both kind of go-getters. Let's keep getting better. And it came to, we were talking about, we're both kind of still struggling with food and, diet and exercise and making that not such a hard thing in our life. And from where we've been, it really is small, but it's kind of what's going on right now, what we want to improve in. And we both know why, like we have the insight, we know the struggles, and we found ourselves pathologizing some of the things that we're still struggling with. And for me, it's like I'm not enough. And when I talk about the mentally strong method, I talk about like core connections, things that kind of always come up. Even though I've been working on myself for years, this continues to come up. I am not enough. I'm healthy. I feel good. Why is that not enough? And, we were able to sit in that for a minute and really kind of separate the pathologizing. And for me, pathologizing with food, kind of stems from, having an eating disorder in my early 20s and kind of continuing to have this disordered eating thought process that often comes back, right? And this is important that you understand is as I'm teaching these things, I am really practicing what I preach. And when you've gone through the extent of grief and trauma that I've been through, you will continue to struggle. It is not, hey, take this little advice and all of your problems will be solved, right? And I think this causes the pathologizing. We see in the self-development world, if you just meditate, if you just manifest, if you just take this supplement, you will no longer feel depressed and anxious. And I do, I take supplements, I see an acupuncturist, I see a chiropractor, I am taking care of myself holistically, but not one of those things cures everything. It's a journey and figuring out what that means for you. So back to pathologizing, we have these two words or industries, right? Self-development and mental health. And in the mental health / mental illness world, when you go to a doctor, you're often given a diagnosis within those DSM, right? And I do this every day. I'm not against this. But my challenge here is to look at this as a continuum. And let's say you meet criteria for major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder or PTSD, right? And there's this subconscious thought that you are supposed to own that you are that's not your fault, and that this is a biochemical problem in your brain. All those things are true. However, it is not who you are. On the other side of that continuum, and I lean towards this side, is that no matter how much better I get, I'm not enough. And on this side, there's like this dependency of I am depressed. It's who I am. There's nothing I can do about it. There is things that you can do for your depression, including taking the meds that you are prescribed. I am not in any way against medication. And then, I'm on this other side where I'm like striving to be probably perfect, right? And none of us are ever perfect, but I need to come to that balance center of I am enough. In the description, you can download my Mentally Strong Brain, which kind of goes into the next phase of this of like borderline personality disorder or personality disorders in general. I think borderline personality disorder is pathologized a lot. And in the mental health space, there's no treatment, there's no medication for borderline personality disorder. And so oftentimes I will not diagnose BPD. So I want you to listen to me, especially if you've been diagnosed with this, because I think oftentimes we're diagnosed, we Google it, we're like, oh my God, that's me. And I actually printed all of the DSM down so I could talk about it. Frantic effort to avoid real or imagined abandonment, right? So BPD, borderline personality, is about relationship and abandonment. But what if you were abandoned as a child and that is just a fear response, a trauma response, as we call it? Also, trauma responses can oftentimes be pathologized, right? So knowing that these could be normal. Continued unstable relationships, again, could be from trauma or a history of abandonment. An unstable self-image, trauma, right? I mean, just imagine if you were molested as a child, and I hear these stories all the time, and then you are diagnosed with BPD as an adult, borderline personality. You are the problem. You need to work on your personality response to your situation. What if it's all related to PTSD? What if we haven't actually processed this trauma? Impulsivity, reoccurrent suicidal ideations, instability of mood, feelings of emptiness, anger, stress-related paranoia or disassociation. These all sound like a trauma response. And now we have, again, I want to use this word pathologizing, quiet BPD, where you're not showing these things outwardly, but you feel this way inwardly. And I can tell you, I remember going through nursing school. I'm in my early 20s, right? I'm struggling with an eating disorder quietly. And we're going through, and I knew I had this eating disorder, and we're going through the personality chapter in our psych course. And I read these things and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And I know now, almost 30 years later, that I don't have borderline personality disorder. But what if I didn't have that drive to figure myself out and I just said, oh, this is who I am? And I often, unfortunately, see this in many of my clients who have taken on this diagnosis as who they are. And you know, one of the best theories, I believe, on personality disorders is it too is a continuum, right? And if you look at it on a scale of 0 to 10, 8 and above is probably manifesting as borderline personality disorder. But we all have tendencies towards these things. And if you look closely at the Mentally Strong Brain that is in the description, that you can download that worksheet, it talks about that same continuum. And, you know, that chaotic brain where everything is emotionally attached. If you naturally have that type of brain and you had trauma and abandonment, I can imagine that you are going to manifest symptoms of borderline personality disorder or quiet borderline personality disorder. But don't own that. And there are so many other reasons that you would be manifesting these things: depression, anxiety, trauma, abandonment. And so, again, looking at these things in a balanced approach. I want you, as I am going to do, to continue on our self-improvement journey. But none of this is black and white. If you read some symptoms of something and you go, oh my God, that's me, that is maybe how you're manifesting. Maybe that is what you're struggling with. And maybe you do need professional intervention. But it is not who you are. And if you're anything like me, it's never going to be enough as you try to improve yourself. So I am going to tell you, as I am going to tell myself today, you are enough. I am enough. And we can do this. We are mentally strong.